Ole, 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 Europe, Europe, Europe. Week 2 in Champions and Europa League dominate the conversation on this episode of Full-Time Roundup. 5 Champions League favorites take charge and take care of business, and 3 major upsets rock some of the groups. Plus, top 4 leagues show off their strength across Europa. We cover all this, and Daniel gives us his picks for the domestic weekend. Full-Time Roundup starts right now. And welcome into another special European Nights episode of the Full-Time Roundup. Matt Gesslin here with the one and only Daniel Brackett, as always. Daniel, there was so much action today across all of Europe, as well as Tuesday and Wednesday. I know those Tuesday, Wednesday, that is, were the highlights for me. And man, are there some areas to focus on and cover. Anything that stood out to you, and what are you tracking on as we kick into the height of Europa and Champions League?
Hey, Matt. Hope you're doing well. Just a forewarning for all of our listeners. I am in the car on the way to the beach, so we're doing a car cast on my side.
Gotta love a
today,
car cast. Gotta love a car cast.
So bear with me if you hear any outside noise or it's a little bit different than usual. So appreciate your flexibility here, Matt. But yeah, I mean, I was just kind of thinking to myself, especially during the UCL slate, I was like, damn, man, it is undefeated. I mean, we had so many goals this week. We didn't actually tally, I don't think, how many goals were scored this week, but it just seemed like every group had at least 7+, which is just so enjoyable for the watcher. I mean, no one wants to watch a 0-0 hard-fought draw. Everyone wants goals, especially for the neutral, because I don't really have a dog in any of these fights here. So I'm just here for the action, and it delivered.
It did deliver. No dog in the fight for me as well. Of course, with Chelsea not being in any European competition, we can, let's all be sad for each other and cry ourselves to sleep. But of course, as you mentioned, you being in the car, a car cast, please don't hit anybody. More importantly, Mista, do not get off this lady. If you don't know that reference, go check out Happy Gilmore anytime. But there's a lot to cover. Yeah, I know we have not a lot of time. We'll jump right into it. We'll go group by group in the Champions League, and then we'll focus on some of the more highlighted groups. And of course, you had your Liverpool play in Europa. So first out of the gate, Group A, Daniel. An interesting group right now. One that, of course, we were expecting the 2 favorites, Bayern Munich and Manchester United, to really establish themselves and come out of here on top. But Copenhagen gave Bayern a pretty good challenge on the road. One thing I do want to call out is that Copenhagen has been a tough out at home. Last year, they drew to both Sevilla, Dortmund, and City, holding Sevilla and City to 0-0 draws and only conceding 1 goal to Dortmund. So any surprises? Of course, Bayern do get it done. They score 2 after going down early to Copenhagen, but get the 2-1 win. Anything that stood out to you there? I know, Bayern's been kind of shaky here the last couple of weeks. It seems, at least.
Yeah, the ship is definitely rocking here for Bayern, and like you said, Copenhagen are have been a sneaky team in Europe the last few years, and I honestly didn't realize that until you just said that. But I was very impressed with them a couple weeks back when they played Galatasaray and they gave them a fight. And I was pretty high on this Galatasaray team, so when I saw that, I was like, maybe this won't be as cut and dry of a group as I thought it was. And Bayern just looked like they were sleepwalking. We've seen that a few times this year, and we've seen some of the best of Tuchel ball, and we've seen some of the worst of Tuchel ball within these first 5 to 7 weeks here of the season. So it hasn't been great after they humbled Bochum. It hasn't been a great last week or so for them. But maybe with Oktoberfest, they've just been partying a little bit too much, and they're just a little hungover from that.
You would think it'll be interesting to see what happens. Of course, they do get a break before they get to Copenhagen at home as the next fixture. So like I said, Copenhagen on the road, a very tough matchup. Of course, they still have Manchester United to play in the back-to-back here. That will be the next 2 weeks. So of Champions League play, especially and Europe leagues as well. They do back-to-back. So home and aways for the two opponents. Thankfully, I think to Manchester United's relief, they play at Old Trafford first. Daniel, that although who knows, after this past week to Galatasaray, that might be more of a curse than a blessing. Manchester United go down 3-2. Any thoughts on this matchup? But boy, is this is just becoming more and more of a storyline for United week in, week out.
Yeah, I mean, Galatasaray, they probably were kind of kicking themselves, especially playing Copenhagen at home first and not at least they got a hard-earned point, if I remember correctly. But this was an interesting matchup. I liked Galatasaray a lot in this match, especially with injuries, mounting injury crisis. And then on top of that, Casemiro gets sent off late in the match, which makes things worse. And this is not even, this scoreline was bad, but I mean, Icardi missed a penalty as well. So it could have been a lot worse for United. You see a Rashford who doesn't look like he did last year. I mean, he had a breakaway and instead of just putting it away like most strikers would, try to sweat it across the Bruno, and it didn't work out. And I don't think Ten Hag's going to be here for much longer, Matt.
Well, that is a statement right there, folks. Something I've been trying to get out of Daniel since the beginning of the season is how long will Erik Ten Hag be around for? I think the writing is a little bit on the wall. They are bottom of the group. This is a big time right now for them, not only in Champions League, and obviously we can spend a whole entire episode just on Manchester United and their problems, but they're having struggles in the Champions League, they're having struggles in Premier League, they're having struggles in the front office, in the coaching room. Everywhere you look for Manchester United, it's a problem. I guess if you feel that if you feel that Erik Ten Hag is getting fired here soon, do you see them advancing in this group, or someone else is going to surprise you?
I don't even think they might get Europa League, honestly, at this rate. I mean, especially with Casemiro, and it's a dire state. The whole club is just pretty shit, honestly, from the owners down. It just has trickled down. It's been just bad for years, and we're kind of seeing the fruits of that, the labor kind of just witness before our eyes, honestly. And they're not doing well in the league either, and I don't think sacking Ten Hag is going to do very much for them. But Ten Hag's also not doing much for them right now as well. I mean, he's setting them up to fail. Excuse me. I mean, I think you have to put Amrabat next to Casemiro when he is not being sent off. I think that's the only way you're going to win games, and you just got to find putting him at left back. I mean, you see he got exploited for one of those goals. He's just not putting. He's putting square pegs in round holes right now, and it's becoming pretty glaringly obvious.
It does feel that way, and you hope that, to your point, they at least try and salvage a way to stay in Europa if they don't make it through the group, and would be a huge blow for one of the biggest teams in England to not make it, and obviously a predicted favorite to advance here with Bayern Munich, who I think we both agree do advance. I'll go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt. I think United still find a way to get out of this group. We'll see if I'm proven wrong, but it's really dire right now. Another team that sticking with England and the theme there that had a really rough week and a rough game, I should say, not a rough week, but is Arsenal going to Lens and losing not only the game on the field, but also one of their biggest players, Daniel. They have a huge matchup this weekend against Manchester City, and Saka goes down with what appears to be a reoccurring injury from the Bournemouth match over the weekend. This group now is completely flipped on its head. You look at Lens, who's winning the group with 4 points, Arsenal with 3 points, Sevilla, who we've talked numerous times about being a European juggernaut, not necessarily in the league, but in the tournament. You don't want to play Sevilla. No. And then, of course, PSV, who are top the Eredivisie at the bottom with 1 point. Any thoughts here? This is a pretty wide open group right now, and anyone. I feel like this is anyone's group.
Yeah, no, I mean you're right about that, and I personally expected it to be a close game against Lons, but I didn't expect Lons to get a result or at least 3 points here. And Saka injury, they in times of need they lean on him probably more than they should, and Saka just happens to. I would say Saka and Odegaard do bail them out, and it's going to be interesting who steps up because now you got Martinelli injured, you got Saka injured, so you're going to have to lean on the likes of Trossard. Are you going to play Nketiah and then Gabby Jesus on the wing, or are you going to call up a Reece Nelson to kind of fill that void? It's going to be interesting to see what Arteta does after international break, and maybe international break being after this weekend is the perfect best case scenario for them to kind of get healthy before all the action starts back. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Sevilla were, I believe, in the was it PSV? Who was leading? Was it Sevilla? Sevilla was leading and I think gave up points to PSV, so they're going to be kicking themselves as well. But it is a very wide open group, a strong group that I didn't really think would amount to much, but it's hasn't failed so far.
Yeah, a surprising group. Agreed for me too. Looking at it from the beginning, you assumed Arsenal, PSV were going to be, just given their play in the domestic league, the two teams that come out of this group. But a wide open group. We did always say from the start, watch out for Sevilla, and you never know what's going to happen. A group that is starting though to kind of separate itself. And you mentioned injuries, and a great segue into this team. Of course, that's Real Madrid still finding a way to make things happen, even though they have, pretty decimated back line. We've talked about it before, Daniel, how that may impact them going forward in this tournament. I think in the group stage, though, they look to be okay. They get a big 3 points against Napoli on the road. Jude Bellingham, what else can we say at this point? Puts on his Superman cape again. Great assist, and then another fantastic finish, although you can blame some defending there on letting a player of his caliber essentially try, take the ball and go 25 yards into the box and not put a glove on them. But they look impressive, and Napoli sits second in this group. Again, more struggles for Union Berlin here, Daniel. I'm not sure, how far they're going to fall. Not only, obviously, it doesn't look promising for them with 0 points through 2 matches in the Champions League, but also domestically as well. A tough time for Union Berlin right now.
Yeah, and if I had $1 for every time we said the same thing. What can you say? Jude is just magic, and his goal contributions. I mean, he had a decent bit for Dortmund last year, but he's just completely gone to a new level. And if I'm Napoli here, I'm pretty disappointed. I imagine they would be kind of licking their lips at this encounter, especially at home in Naples, just with the injury list that is Real Madrid right now. And this was the perfect opportunity for them to grab a draw here and try to fight for that top spot. And I mean, when you hit him as sweet as Valverde did, there's not really much you can do. But yeah, no, the pivot to the other game, Union Berlin continue to stink. It's looking pretty bad for them. And we see this every once in a while when a team outperforms. They get some European football, and then they just can't kind of put results together in domestic and then in Europe. So it's kind of tough to see. But hey, shout out to Braga. They went out and got it done, and they've been punching above their weight just like Union had, but are actually getting results here.
Yeah, and you mentioned Braga.
I have a question for you too.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
is Jude carrying Real Madrid right now and saving Ancelotti?
I mean, I feel like that's an easy answer. I think, we've talked about his late heroics and especially in the league games, and getting some goals in 90 plus to carry them. They easily could be, they're undefeated right now in the league. But it could very easily have been a very different start had Jude Bellingham not put on his cape. And that's why we speak so highly of him, right? It's not because of hyperbole or he makes 1 or 2 moves here and there. He's literally carrying Real Madrid for me. And I think they'll go as far as he goes, which is amazing to say, as a 20-year-old that puts on the shirt. And that's not a small shirt to put on. And, that's one of the biggest clubs, if not the biggest club in the world. And he just steps right in, and boy, does he fit. He looks like he was meant to be there and been playing at Real Madrid for 10 plus years and a Galactico, really. And you don't really expect that. And someone mentioned to me the other day, and you kind of put it in perspective, right? All these guys getting big moves and making moves to big clubs, and they need time to adjust, or they need time to kind of settle in with a new league. You know what? If you have what it takes and you're the real deal, you don't need that adjustment period. You just jump right into it. And you're seeing that right now with a player like Jude Bellingham. Again, what else can we say? 20 years old. But just keep that in perspective, folks. The kid is 20 years old, and he's, 8 goals for Real Madrid in 9 games, in the biggest moments.
And you see the connection he has with his teammates too. It's just incredible. I mean, he's not only arguably the best player in the world as we speak, which is, we haven't really talked about it, but I genuinely think he is the best player in the world currently. And you just see that he not only fit like a glove for Real Madrid, but he's also just made connections and hit it off with all his Madrid teammates. And these best teams in the world, the Galacticos, if you say, as you will, they're not easy dressing rooms at times, and we've seen with PSG with the disarray of last season. So I've just been really impressed with not only Jude as a player, but Jude as a person. He's a natural leader, and I just am running out of adjectives to kind of explain him.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you say? Like you mentioned, and again, we could go on and on about this kid, and there's a lot to cover. But you mentioned, him being a leader. He first came in and said, I want to learn from Toni Kroos and Luka Modric, and boy has he. Not to put those guys aside and say they're slouches. They're obviously some of the best players in the last decade, but he's really taken the mantle from those guys and putting on a show week in, week out in La Liga. Another team from La Liga that we've been very high on and continues to impress, Daniel, Real Sociedad in Group D, atop the group there along with Inter. Big win here against Salzburg, a team that has been struggling, but still kind of stays in the hunt. 1 point behind the top 2, of course. The lowly Benfica with no points there. This is a tough group to pick as well. A lot of these groups, of course. Let's be honest. This is Champions League. This is the best of the best. So it is not unexpected that a lot of these groups are tight, but some that you kind of thought would be a lot more wide open are a little bit more nail biters than you thought. And it is week 2, so we'll see what happens. There's a lot that happens here in between weeks 3 and 4. But any thoughts on Group D at this point?
I'm really impressed with Real Sociedad. We talked about, or we discussed who's on our top 4, and I actually picked them to be maybe in my top 4 for La Liga for the year. They got 2 early goals, which definitely helped their case, because Salzburg, say what you want and how young and unexperienced their squad is, but they're no slouches, and there's been question marks about the coach, but when you have just so much young talent on that team and just how fearless they are, you'll never not back them to at least get a goal or 2, and that's good to see. And I mean, Real Sociedad took care of business. They didn't concede any late. There was no nervous moments. So it's good to see. And then talking about, Inter Milan, what does Lautaro Martinez have to do to score a goal? Did you see all those misses he had?
Multiple posts. I think he used them all up in the league, scoring 4. So
Crazy.
it's kind of one of those things. Which do you prefer? You'd almost prefer him to have 2 and 2, but yeah, it's been a rough week, I guess, if you want to say a guy who scored 4. But when it matters most in Champions League, they weren't able to get it done, but they're still in pretty good shape, Daniel. I think, for me, of course, Benfica is a surprise of this group, just given how historically notoriously strong they've been in Portugal, as well as in this tournament. They usually advance, but for me, Real Sociedad, Inter look to be the strongest in this group for me.
I agree, and I'm thinking Salzburg will probably secure that Europa spot, and unfortunately Benfica will have to kind of focus on winning Liga NOS, and that'll be that for them.
Yeah, and don't look now, but we've talked about the last 3 groups, and first and second place in those groups are both La Liga and Serie A teams, Daniel. Group E as well, you have Atletico Madrid, who get a huge result against Feyenoord, crazy 3-2 win over that team when going down. And never thought I'd say that Diego Simeone's team scores 3 goals back-to-back games. And then Lazio, who we talked about having a lot of struggles in the league to start, coming on strong in Champions League, second place right now. Of course, again, preface it, it's early. Feyenoord's only 1 point behind, but a really interesting group as well. Two top teams that, again, come from the same league, and it'll be an interesting dynamic here. And Antoine Griezmann, what can you say about him? He's been maybe the best player since Qatar. And then, of course, Alvaro Morata, who continues his form with 2 goals. Questionable call on the first one for him, but they count. No VAR decision here that ruled that one over.
Yeah, that offside call was tough. I honestly had no idea which way the ref was going to go with that. Just because he made the run, but he didn't make a play for the ball. So that was a tough one. There were some tough VAR calls throughout the whole Champions League slate here. Griezmann with the nice bicycle kick. You love to see that. And I mean, they go down early to a beautiful Quentin Timber to, I can't remember who the striker was for Feyenoord, and he slots it away off a tough deflection from Cardoso, or was it Cardoso? I can't remember who that defender was, but Atletico start off rough. They fight back and they end up kind of just sliding by. Now, I did tweet from the account. I'm just imagining in my head if Santiago Jimenez played for Feyenoord, how this match would have probably been an instant classic 4-3 match. But Feyenoord are punching above their weight, in my opinion, and I've been super impressed with them this year. And they handled Ajax a week or two ago, and they keep getting results in the Champions League, and it's going to be really interesting to see if they can actually fight for that second spot.
Yeah, you mentioned punching above their weight, so I have to ask the question: who comes out of this group for you, Daniel? Does Feyenoord get it done, or is it still Atleti and Lazio for you?
I think that Feyenoord and Atletico make it out. Atletico topping the group, and just because of Lazio's abysmal away record and just how they kind of started the season, they will not make it and go to Europa League. But hey, they got it done at Celtic, and maybe that's like a season turning around right there. Just the last 94th minute goal from Pedro. You'll love to see it. I mean, I had them in the parlay, and that. I mean, I was very heavy on Lazio this week. I didn't understand why they weren't being favored, and they got it done. So can they put one result after another? That's the question of the day here.
Yeah, and of course, you mentioned Celtic. Poor Brendan Rodgers just cannot buy a win in not only in Champions League, but struggling in the league as well. He goes back to where he came from before going to Leicester, and things just have not been great for him in that return back to Celtic. You hope that they can kind of get things turned around, but looks like a lowly spot to be for them in this group. And I agree with you. I mean, Feyenoord has been impressive. Of course, I think Atleti gets it done at the top, and Feyenoord and takes the second place. So it'll be an interesting position. That would leave one Italian team out. That would, we talked about a couple of Italian teams before. We're talking about one last one here in the big group that everyone has been talking about, Daniel. Group F, group of death. It has not disappointed so far. Every team is still in this group. Of course, the big matchup in this group this past week was at St. James's Park, with Newcastle United absolutely dismantling PSG 4-1. St. James's was absolutely rocking. If you didn't see the pre-match activity and the festivities with the fans, check it out. One of the best environments I've seen, and I'm not even a big Geordie fan. But what was your key takeaway from this game, and a big surprise for me at 4-1? I mean, maybe you think Newcastle can get a result or maybe get a draw, but I didn't expect 4-1 after that match.
I was thinking it'd probably be a draw, and then I saw the starting lineups, and I just couldn't really fathom what Luis Enrique was thinking with his starting lineup. He basically played a 4-2-4 almost at the Toon Army, which makes sense. I mean, I heard a stat. It was the last time Champions League or Newcastle played in the Champions League, Sir Bobby Robson was coaching in, I think it was 2003. That was 3 years after I was born, so that's a pretty long time. And Luis Enrique, that loss is on him. I mean, that you got to play his 4-3-3. He tinkered too much with it, and they just got overrun. Like the legendary Ray Hudson said, PSG looked like a giraffe on skates here. Bad giveaways. They were just getting pressed, playing out of the back, and it was pretty disgusting, abysmal performance for PSG here.
Yeah, you mentioned the lineup, a strange one for me as well. You put two youngsters. I mean, Ugarte is a great player. He's going to be great, but he's the older of the two in the midfield at 22 years old. Of course, Zaire Emery, 17, and you're putting them on the road at one of the most notoriously difficult places to play. And you mentioned 20 years since the last opportunity in Champions League. That's just a really difficult place to put two youngsters in. Of course, you're not getting much help from Mbappe, who is absolutely useless, not only on the ball, off the ball, just didn't even come back and defend. And same with Dembele. Not to be surprised about Dembele, honestly, but, leaving completely those guys exposed. Kieran Trippier down the right-hand side just had a field day with having all sorts of time. And there's some opportunity there. Luis Enrique mentioned a couple of mistakes that cost them. I think it's more than just a couple of mistakes. I think there's a lot to this that needs to be unpacked. And I think you're looking at, the beginning of the end of the Mbappe era at PSG. I think the longer that he can stay there, I think the worse that PSG will end up being. They're having trouble in the league as well. I think, you look at, for reference, you mentioned Ray Hudson, who, of course, with his magical calls of Lionel Messi and what he did over the years, and how, when Messi got older, he adapted and had teams around him and players that worked for him off the ball. You saw that with Argentina in the World Cup. And you don't have that right now with this PSG team. You didn't have it last year with that PSG team, either with Messi and Neymar and Mbappe. And Mbappe is just not going to work back for you. He's just going to stay up top. And then you bring in guys like Dembele, who's going to do the same thing, and Koulibaly. They're not going to come back and work and help the defenders or the midfielders. And it just leaves you outnumbered. And you see what happens, that 4-1 drubbing, I would say. It could have been a lot worse. The stats look like it's more possession for PSG, but you never felt like PSG, other than the Mbappe chance early on, was in this match. And it felt like a Newcastle win through and through, and a big moment for Newcastle. They're playing well in the league now. And of course, this is a momentum builder, confidence builder for these guys. So it'll be interesting to see what happens for them. Of course, the other game in this group, Daniel, AC Milan and Borussia Dortmund, they get a draw in this one, 0-0 draw. That's 2 games now for AC Milan without a goal. Of course, they can do it. They can keep moving and continuing to advance. And we saw them do it last year. Going to San Siro is going to be a tough challenge for anybody. But you would have to think that Milan have to score a goal at some point to advance from this particular group, right? This group is just too tough to not score a goal.
Yeah, no, you're right on that. And kind of harp on not scoring goals. Dortmund are the only team in the entire competition to not register one big chance. So they've been one of probably the worst teams in the entire Champions League this year. And this Milan Dortmund game looked like the battle of mid, honestly, in my opinion. And it would have been, I mean, I guess a point, a good result for both teams, especially with PSG losing here. But who's gonna step up and get 3 points for both of these teams? And we see Gio Reyna with another did not play at all. And when your team needs a goal late and you got a player who's so mercurial like him, you'd think Terzic would give him the opportunity, and it was pretty disappointing not. And Rafa Leao has still been shut out in this Champions League campaign, which has been surprising. So this group is far from over, and I feel like it's anyone's group. And I mean, credit to Eddie Howe for how he kind of managed Newcastle against PSG, and maybe PSG turns it around here, but I honestly could not predict this group for the life of me.
Yeah, it will be interesting. You mentioned Eddie Howe and getting his team. They do have to go to the Yellow Wall, which will be just an absolute environment. Same with St. James's Park. So you're looking at 2 of the best environment. Yeah, absolutely.
Iconic arenas.
Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, the home matches are massive in any of these games. And Dortmund only getting a point at home. Same with Milan against Newcastle. Will that come back to haunt both of these teams? We will see. I'm going to give you a surprise here, Daniel. I'm going to give you a surprise. I have Newcastle and Dortmund advancing from this group. I'll go ahead and put that on paper. That's my prediction. I won't hold you to a pick right now. We'll get one from you after the next match. But that for me is the group here. And of course, like you said, anyone's group of death. That's what happens. And you have 4 very strong teams. I just don't think you can count out a Borussia Dortmund, who we've talked about have not been playing their best ball, and yet they still continue to hang around both domestically and in the Champions League. And if they can find some form, or they get a cheeky result here or there, they advance for me. And Newcastle sitting at the top. That's, it's easy when you sit at the top. So that's who I have. If there's any way that you want to chime in, I'll leave the floor for you. If not, we can advance to Group G and get you off the hook.
I kind of want to get in on the fun here, and I'm going to say PSG still tops the group, which is hard for me to say, but I do think they'll turn around, especially if Enrique goes back to the 4-3-3 that has been winning them games domestically and abroad. And I'm going to say Newcastle is my second pick, with Milan in third and Dortmund in fourth. So I disagree with you pretty wholeheartedly here.
We'll see who turns out to be correct. And of course, great picks all around. You can't go wrong. It's a toss up. Now, one group that is pretty much, I would say, set in stone for me is Group G. Daniel, of course, a big matchup at RB Leipzig Arena with Manchester City, and going in and getting 3 points in a 3-1 win. But for me, Manchester City, RB Leipzig come out of this, especially with young boys and Red Star splitting the points in a wild back and forth game, but too much firepower at both of those top 2 teams. City looked great again and kind of finding that form, and they have a big matchup we alluded to earlier with Arsenal on the weekend that we'll get here into later on. But, pretty ho-hum group and pretty standard at this point.
Yeah. If City lost this one, and that would have been 3 winless, I would have probably went and bought a lottery ticket, because I haven't seen that happen in a long time. But, they respond, and the score sheet doesn't flatter City, in my opinion. They got a goal late, and I thought Leipzig kept it pretty respectable, although City made them look pretty toothless on the attack. And I mean, at the end of the day, it is City, and Leipzig probably, they just had to play Bayern at the weekend, and then they had to play City. It's 2 not very fun matches. But if I'm Leipzig, I'm still kind of laser focused on the second spot here and just getting it done against young boys in Severna.
Yeah, and you mentioned 2 tough games for RB Leipzig. Of course, they go up in both of those games, and they draw in one and lose in the other. So they have some fire. They have some firepower, but they're going to have to step it up and take out the big boys if they want to continue and advance further on in this tournament. Again, I think they still make it out of the group, but it'll be interesting to see what happens now. The last group that we're going to discuss, and of course that is the last group, is Group H. An interesting dynamic here. Barcelona with Porto is the big matchup in this one this past weekend. Some controversial calls here that give Barcelona the 3 points. They sit atop the table. But Daniel, for me, the real storyline here is the second place position. Porto, Shakhtar, poor Antwerp, who had a 2-goal lead and give up the points at the end. Sorry to our Belgian listeners, and don't want you guys to get too upset with us, but is what it is. And they sit at the bottom of the table with 0 points. Give me your second place pick. I don't want to necessarily assume that Barcelona is going to drop from the top for you, but I'll assume that Barca is not going to drop from the top for you. So give me your second place team here.
Porto, 1,000%. Barca skated by in this match, and it took about everything in God's power to get them this 3 points. I mean, the refs with the VAR call, with the handball before João Cancelo had a handball. Ter Stegen had a couple great saves. You see Lewandowski kind of limp off. So this is a 3 points for Barca, because they might, with being so far ahead, they might be able to rest guys, especially with their little mini injury crisis that they have currently. So I think it's Porto's second place to lose here, and kind of, I don't really know who's going to. I suspect, I guess, Shakhtar now to get Europa spot, but I really thought Antwerp was going to be frisky for that third spot.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like you said, we thought they were going to be more competitive, and they just continue to drop points. That you look at an opportunity, also like you mentioned, with Barcelona to rest some players if they can get a big win in the next matchup against Antwerp as well. So that'll be, or excuse me, they play the other team in the group, not to be
Oh,
withstanding,
Shakhtar.
but Shakhtar, so that'll be interesting going on the road. Shakhtar gave Real Madrid a game last season in the Champions League, so keep an eye out for that. But if Barca can get the points, they have the second half of the home and home to rest some guys. I think it'll be an interesting time, especially with, like you said, some of those injuries going into El Clasico after the international break, and how that could impact them. So we'll see what happens. And you hope that this becomes a more competitive group. But for me, I have the same Barca, Porto. That's kind of how this group moves on. We mentioned that was the last group in Champions League. That was not the last group of the action that happened. Of course, today, Europa League dominated the scoreboard. All the teams playing across all the groups in Europa. Daniel, this is where you and your Liverpool boys rested. And of course, a tough match, tougher than you probably think.
Yeah, I was pretty pissed, honestly, about it. And we almost let them kind of get a result here at the end. We were playing with fire the last 10 minutes, and I was only able to watch probably half of this match, but Darwin missed a sitter early that kind of, I think, would have put a bow on the game pretty early, but we left it late. We scored a goal right before half. Shout out Ryan Gravenberg. He's just been phenomenal since he kind of stepped in, or put on a Liverpool shirt, I should say. And I mean, a win's a win, but especially when you play your big boys, you expect kind of a better result here. And maybe they kind of were looking ahead to Brighton on Saturday, but a win's a win here, Matt.
Yeah, and you kind of look at it that way too. Maybe Brothers McAllister had some kind of side talk and said, let's be a little bit easy on each other and make it more interesting now. But of course, surprising result. You still get the 3 points, though. You got to take it for when you can. No replays from Jurgen Klopp complaining here. So a good all in all. You get the 3 points and move on, and we'll see what happens. Another team in the Premier League that of course you've been very high on, and a group that we've been interested in is West Ham. They get 3 points as well. They sit atop the table, beating Freiburg today, and kind of a clash of the group, I would say. Of course, Olympiacos is there as well as probably more of the other stronger of the 4 teams. TSC kind of sits at the bottom, rightfully so, but West Ham getting that win today, kind of solidifies their place atop the group, and obviously I think continues them into the knockout stage. And credit to David Moyes, again, winning Conference League last season, and losing your best player arguably in Declan Rice, and yet having a strong start in the Premier League and currently sit atop their group in Europa League.
Yeah, they've been a very big surprise for me this year, and I think Moyes kind of continues to build his resume here, even at an older age. I guess he ages like fine wine, Matt, when it comes to coaching here. But yeah, well-earned, hard-fought victory against Freiburg. Freiburg are no slouch here, and you see James Ward-Prowse have a big response after surprisingly getting left off the plane for England. So he responds in a big way with some goal contributions in this game, and good to see West Ham kind of punching above their weight, or not above their weight, but still getting results week in, week out.
Yeah, and of course the other team in the Premier League, and so all 3 teams in the Premier League get a result. Brighton, who struggled again, going down to Marseille 2-0, but fight back and get a draw. A big draw keeps them in the competition. If they had lost this game, Daniel, I think you're looking on the outside for a team like Brighton, but a big draw there for them. Again, all three Premier League teams get a point. A good group again that we've talked about here in Group B. Very competitive. Athens as well, getting the draw with Ajax, who could have used the result, but Athens being mid-table in the Greek league, you're kind of expecting when Ajax takes the lead to hold on to it, but that's just been the season that Ajax have had. And then Marseille again with the draw against Brighton. Any thoughts here on who advances from this group, or is it really just kind of may the best team win essentially?
This is the Europa League group of death here. Athens have looked great. Marseille have looked pretty good. Ajax continue to falter here. I genuinely have no idea who's going to win or who's going to get knocked out. I honestly could not do a prediction. Brighton have struggled rotation wise. So I would be guessing at that point. So I don't even have a clue.
Well, one team that we do know that will advance, and one of our favorites across domestically and in the cup, is Bayer Leverkusen. They get 3 points today against Molde. They, and as well as FK Klarbag, are currently at 6 points. The other two teams are at 0 points. So you kind of expect these. It's almost wrapped up, I would say, if you ask me. Frimpong, of course, gets a goal. Continues his form that we've seen and talked about, at length. So nothing, surprising there. They're going to be one of the teams to really be looking out for in the tournament and and beyond. Not only the tournament, but in domestic league as well. Daniel, one of the more interesting groups as well that I didn't think I would be talking about is Group C. All four teams have 3 points. That group includes my fourth pick in La Liga, which is Real Betis, who get a big result today, and they've been in some pretty good form. It's an interesting group there. Of course, you have Prague and Rangers, and just an interesting dynamic. And then Group D, another group that's wide open. Atalanta getting a big result against Sporting CP today. They sit atop with 6 points. Sporting second place with 3 points. Strum with 3 points as well. So some really interesting groups here in Europa League. Again, they'll be fighting down to the wire. But one last team I wanted to talk about with you here is AS Roma. A team. Jose Mourinho has been in the news of late, of course, with talking about how this is the worst performance and start for his teams, and they get a massive result, six points right now, top of the table with Prague. Can this be a turning point for Roma, not only for their season but also domestically as well?
We'll see. The team they played is pretty weak, so I wouldn't draw too many conclusions off this game. But when your team's playing as bad as Roma is currently, any win will do here, and they win pretty emphatically. So maybe it's just a personal victory for some individual performances, and that kind of spurs them on. But when Mourinho is bringing out stats of things he did in previous years to calm the reporters kind of questioning his job security, he's pretty rattled here. So it's going to be an interesting next couple months to see if this Roma Jose romantic relationship kind of goes away in flames.
Yeah, I know. And you mentioned earlier in the season that could be the end for Jose Mourinho and the time at Roma, but he seems to have righted the ship a little bit. But to your point, talking about the Conference League, like it was the greatest achievement he's ever had when he's won multiple Champions Leagues and Premier Leagues and La Ligas. And so just, typical Jose stuff. And you mentioned individual performances. Lukaku gets a goal today as well. But, Servette, not the most, difficult opponent, but they do sit atop and look like they're going to advance and get to the knockout stage, which Jose Mourinho in a tournament, you do not want to go against that man. He knows how to play and he knows how to advance in tournaments. So just keep an eye out for Roma. Daniel, I know that you have an interest in a couple of groups in the Europa Conference League, which I don't know how many people are watching that, but they too were in action today. And I know that there's a couple of teams that you're curious about and want to highlight for that tournament.
Yeah, well, the group I've been focused on is I'm trying to remember the group name, so forgive me, but it has Aston Villa and AZ Alkmaar and
Group E. I'll help you out while you're
Group
in the
E.
car. Group E.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. But both of them were kind of sitting at the bottom of the group after week 2, and I was taken away by that, and they both got gritty 1-0 wins at home, which is honestly pretty concerning, the fact that you're at home and obviously you have to rotate, but these are teams you should be comfortably winning by, especially after Aston Villa were flying high, beating being a Brighton team 6-1. So I was kind of surprised by or taken aback by those results there. But good to see that they finally got 3 points here. And I just wanted to kind of quickly mention that before we get done. And all four teams have 3 points, so it's a wide open race still.
Yeah, you mentioned, of course, their 6-1 drubbing against Brighton over the past weekend, and just reflects, and we've talked about it before, just how difficult these times are right now with so many games for some of these teams, and 4 games in a month for some of these guys, if not more. So not surprising that both Villa and AZ get a little bit of a challenge, but advance and get the points there. But Daniel, we covered a lot. It feels like there's games at every point and never ending. But when we come back, we'll dive quickly into some of the games that are coming up this weekend, a couple big ones across domestic leagues. And then, of course, you are the hottest picker in the game right now, so we'll have to get your best bets for the folks to get them ready. And then, of course, folks, we would love to continue to interact with you guys on X, so please follow us, Full-Time Roundup. Be part of the conversation there. Please download the podcast and subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be right back after a quick break with some other action on the other side. And we're back. As we mentioned before the break, there's a lot going on, Daniel, and we want to try and cover it all for you. So we're going to quickly run here through some of the key matchups for this week in both Premier League as well as some of the other domestic leagues. And then, of course, we got to get to your best bets, Daniel, and you're just on fire right now. But again, want to touch on some of these big matchups. We mentioned a little bit earlier already the City Arsenal matchup and kind of, what's happening there. Of course, Rodri's out for City. Saka is going to be out for Arsenal, it looks like. How much of an impact do both of those injuries, make and have for both teams, and try and give us a winner here, because I feel like this is one of the matchups that is kind of slowly under the radar as far as importance in the Premier League. It just feels like it's not getting all that hype, maybe because it is around Champions League and before the international break, but a really big matchup long term, I think, for the title.
Yeah, I liked Arsenal a lot here with Saka, but without Saka, I'm not so sure. The Rodri absence hurts, but when you got Grealish and Bernardo Silva back healthy, that definitely helps things. So you can go ahead and flip a coin here. I do think City had the edge, and so I'm gonna give these 3 points to City.
Can't go wrong against that. I think City has Arsenal's number a little bit too, especially the way last year ended. I'll go ahead and take City as well. I think they find some form and get back into shape, especially they look pretty good. And, yes, on Wednesday in that victory against RB Leipzig. And you mentioned the injuries. Not only is Saka out, but Arsenal has a load of injuries right now. It'll be an interesting fight. I think it'll be a 1-0 City win, but a game that, long-term we'll look back on and have pretty big ramifications for the title. Another big title matchup, although probably more so for one team than the other, with Brighton slipping a little bit, is Brighton versus Liverpool. Never count out Brighton and De Zerbi ball, though. De Zerbi could sneak up on you guys and catch you, but do you feel pretty confident, or did today give you a little pause for hesitation and how you guys are going to perform?
I actually feel extremely confident about this one. They also played today, and it was away, I believe, too. So we were at Anfield and they were traveling. You can fact check me on that, but I do feel pretty good about this. Brighton play a very high line, so I think we can exploit that. We also got thumped at Anfield 3-0 last year when we were kind of at our worst, and I think Klopp's going to use that as bulletin board material, especially as we weren't purring as much as he would probably want midweek. So I think we're going to be firing in goals here.
Can't disagree with you there. I think Liverpool gets it done. Another high-flying team we've talked about is Newcastle, who get a big David Moyes West Ham team here this weekend. Geordies get it done, or a surprise result here from a staunch defensive-minded West Ham?
I'm going to go draw. Maybe like a 1-1 draw. I think that the Gordies are going to be flying high after they beat PSG, and both teams off a win. And I think that it's going to be a pretty ugly, tough test here. And I think it's just going to be a 1-1 draw.
I'll go 1-1 draw with you as well. Be on the lookout though. Newcastle could be, up for a counterattack. Jared Bowen goal from West Ham. Wouldn't
Yeah.
surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me if West Ham does get a result, but I'll stick with a 1-1 draw with you. One game that definitely will not be 1-1, especially with recent form, Atleti and Real Sociedad. Both teams can put the ball in the net. Again, I would not have expected to say that to you earlier in the season with Atleti, but 6 goals in their last 2 games, both domestic and cup. A big one here too, as well, for Atleti to keep pace with Real Madrid and Barcelona, especially with El Clasico coming up, and they could really kind of take a step forward here with this one. What are you seeing from Diego Simeone's men, and does Real Sociedad give him a match?
Oh, Real Sociedad 100% gives them a match. This Atletico team is not the prototypical Simeone team. They've been pretty loose at the back to start the season, which is just pretty surprising here. And I think this is as well going to be a draw. I'm going to go 2-2.
Lots of draws. I like it. Sitting on the fence. I'll take Atleti with my prediction of top winning the league. So I got to keep up with them, and they keep scoring, and you expect that Atleti defense to some point come back in. So if they keep scoring and they can find a way to get that defense more back to what Diego Simeone is used to, I think you're looking at a really, really strong Atletico Madrid. So I'll take Atleti, and I think it's a good game. I think, maybe a 3-1 with some chances there that Real Sociedad will regret later on, but give me the 3 points for Atleti. Another interesting matchup in Serie A, a team that I've been high on. I have them in my top 4 is Atalanta. They get their W today, like I mentioned earlier, against a very strong Sporting. They play Lazio, who we've talked about their struggles, Daniel, in the league especially. Do they kind of surprise some folks here? Do they build off that performance even though they lost in the Champions League, or is Atalanta, too much for these guys, especially at home?
I'm gonna pick up Atalanta here. Lazio have been awful, like I mentioned, away from home, and even they did have to travel, and both teams had to travel, but I do think Atalanta gets it done here. It might be a scrappy win, but it's a win. A win is a win, basically.
Win's a win. I think Atalanta, we've talked about them before, and I think their offensive firepower is a little bit too much for Lazio, something that they've continued to have the last couple of seasons, and not really known in the Serie A for offense, and they've been one of those teams, along with Fiorentina, really, that have put the ball in the back of the net, and you start to see a lot of these other teams starting to change their style a little bit. I think Atalanta, you give them a lot of credit for that over the years, but too much for Lazio. I think Atalanta get the 3 points. Last game we want to cover quickly is of course, this is a big one, Daniel. This is a big game for Luis Enrique, a bounce back performance for PSG against Rennes. Can they get it done, or do the struggles continue for PSG?
We're going to find a lot about this PSG team this week. I think this is where we'll find out, do they have character, or are they the same old PSG, just calamitous as always? I think Enrique goes back to the 4-3-3 here. I think they draw against Rennes, but I think the performance is a little bit more encouraging than what we saw in midweek.
I mean, a draw would be a draw would be an improvement, certainly, but I think also a pretty big setback for them. They currently sit 5th in the league, which is very surprising at this point. That would be their 4th draw in the first 8 games. So you're looking, I mean, for me, if they don't get a win here, you're really starting to put some question marks around Luis Enrique. I think he's there for the long haul. I don't think that this game really determines, his performance as a manager, but you really start to feel the heat for him at this point if they get blown out by Newcastle and then, again, get a mediocre result and drop any further in the table in Liga. They're not expected to be down in 5th, and certainly not expected to be lower than that. So big matchup here. I think PSG gets it done, especially since it's at the Parc des Princes. I think they find a way to get a result, the big result coming off in a bounce back performance. May not be reflective of where they go long term, but I think they get a result here, and they kind of right the ship for a little bit. I did notice, Daniel, as we move into your best bets, though, No mention of PSG, no mention of any French teams in your best bets. I think that's probably wise. As actually, you have Monaco. Excuse me, you have Monaco in there. So pretty wise. But hey, who am I to question the master? Continues to be on fire. So what am I talking about? What do I know? This is why I don't bet. But give the people your recap from this past week in European games, and then give us your best bets for the weekend.
Yeah, off a losing week, what do? You got to show character, like I said, and boys, we responded here. It was a profitable UCL slate for us. The parlay of the week: Bayern money line, scrappy as always. Liverpool, no sweat. Barcelona, scrappy as hell, and Lazio. I mean, talk about a bunch of dogs, and that hungry dogs, if you will. And that cash is 5-1. What a moment is felt when, I mean, the hard ones were Lazio and Barca, and I was kind of sweating those out. But a 5-1, that's easy money. That's up 5 units there. The mortal lock disgusts me. I'm 1-3 in mortal locks, but stay with me here. There was goals always in this match. I don't know really what Liverpool was doing here. As soon as I saw the lineups with Salah starting, I love this pick, and I just can't believe it didn't hit. So we're -3 units there. Still up 2 with the best bets, and I am 17-9-2 in best bets this year. That is a very, very good record. Not to toot my own horn here, and went one here. Galatasaray Man U over was a no sweat cash. We won on Brighton. We continue to take Brighton here as they haven't had a game go under yet against Marseille. And this third best bet that lost was a painful one. Ajax versus Athens. There was, I think, 30 plus shots from both teams. I think a combined XG of around 4, and it was only a 1-1 draw. So that one is painful. So, don't judge me on my winners, judge me on my losers. And it seems like when I do lose, it's a pretty close one. So we're up 18 units on the year. So a unit, for example, is just whatever you put on a game. So if it's $20, $50, $100, $10, we are up 18 units in 6 weeks. So you should probably just write down what I have to say and keep trucking here. So domestic league parlay of the week, second one this week. I am 4-6 in these. That's a pretty good clip for a multiple leg parlay here. We have Spurs against Luton. Spurs against the low block, but Luton is that bad. They did get probably their only points they will ever get the rest of the season here. So I'm going to back Spurs, even with the injury troubles, to get it done. I have Girona over Cadiz. Girona did get humbled against Real Madrid last week, but that is Real Madrid. So I think they will bounce back in a big way against Cadiz. And I got probably the most disgusting pick of all, Chelsea against Burnley. I have Chelsea money line here, and they've rattled off 2 wins here. I think Burnley is very bad, and they did play on Tuesday. So playing almost a UCL schedule here, and I think they'll have to rotate, and Chelsea should take care of business right before the end of the break. For mortal locks, I know you're probably sick of me, Liverpool this, Liverpool that, but guys, this is fucking free money. 3.5, Liverpool, Brighton. These teams do not go under, ever. And with these high lines and sketchy defenses that Brighton has, and Liverpool's always prone for an error, this could be 6. If you want to alt line to 4.5, I still think that hits. So I love this play. 3 units or 2-win 3 units here. Basically even odds here. Last time I checked the book here. And then for best bets, Liverpool money line. I think Liverpool has a score to settle with Brighton. Just with the rotation, I just don't think Brighton have the depth that we do. And I think that Liverpool takes care of business here pretty comfortably. Second best bet, Wolfsburg, Stuttgart over 3. Stuttgart did me dirty, but I think this is a real test for Stuttgart here. And Guirassy just continues to dazzle. So I think there's goals. I think this will end probably a 3-2, 2-3 kind of game here. So I'm not really worried about this one at all. Third, we go back to the well with Monaco. Monaco loves to score a goal. They also love to concede. Rennes have looked great going forward, so I think this sails over 3 here pretty easily. And third, or is it third? No, fourth, but not least. Oh, with the Saka, actually, scratch the fourth game. Atletico, Real Sociedad over. I liked what you had to say, Matt, even though you are a cooler and I should probably be fading you. With the Saka injury, I don't want to bet this Arsenal City over, so I'm going to have Atletico Madrid, Real Sociedad. I would suspect it's over 2.5, maybe 3, but I think that's easily over.
Folks, I can attest. I saw the pain on his face as he had to take a game that I talked about. We have, if you know me, my friends that listen to the show, and Daniel and I have talked about it, I am the cooler, so take this one at a grain of salt. But you heard the man right here. Daniel, I'm rooting for you. I'm also rooting for you to make it to the beach. I know you're still in the car, so best of luck there. I know the listeners are as well. Let's hope that the picks can keep on coming and the bank accounts can keep flowing. If you aren't following Daniel on his Twitter account, follow him over there at Liverpool CLTFC for more bets. They do go up there, as he also gives you a few extras along the way. And you can also follow us on our new handle, which is at Full-Time Roundup, which we mentioned earlier. We'd love to continue the conversation with you guys and hear from you on what you want to talk about on the show. Please as well download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating. And as always, we will see you in the next roundup.